it's funny, but it's also gruesome.
And then that knowledge is power aspect, you know, the world's huge. You have to learn what's in every store to sort of like maximize and find out where all the best weapons are. You have to figure out the best paths to take, the best way to beat the clock. And basically, the more you know, the better you are at the game. And like, you know, players will talk about, well, I did this mission and this is how I did it, and I did that mission, that's how I did it. And obviously, everyone has their play styles. You'll find they'll tell a different story for how they resolved it.
Yeah.
So.
And it's ironic that you've got to use your brain to survive a bunch of zombies that want to eat your brain.
Yes.
And that brings us to pillar number 7, which is the new hook for Dead Rising 2. So combo weapons. We've got a new character. His name is Chuck Green. He's an ex-motocross star, and he's very handy. He's very mechanical. So just like Frank West had his camera in Dead Rising 1, we wanted to give the new hero of Dead Rising 2 a skill that was all his own, something that he could also generate PPs and experience with, and it made sense that it was something mechanical. So it begged the question, if this guy's in a mall or a casino and he's trying to survive, what would he do? He would try and find weapons, obviously, but he's got the skills to take those weapons and actually combine them, blend them together, and kill zombies even more effectively. So if you take a kayak and, or a kayak paddle and a couple of chainsaws, you end up with the paddle saw. And
it just makes sense.
That's what I would have done, yeah.
It's like, just get some duct tape and solve it.
Yeah, so this is just one of many, many combo weapons that will be featured in Dead Rising 2. This is one of the more iconic ones. But yeah, you're going to actually see more of this later when we do a live demo of the game.
So that takes us sort of like, you know, we kind of understand what the game is and how we sort of drove that vision. And now we're trying to figure out, well, how we're going to pull the team together to make it, right? So for the creative process for us developing, you're my click man.
Oh, sorry.
First up, we want to set up some really clear goals. Know what the vision is. It sounds abstract, and really it sounds kind of pretentious, but really just knowing what it is you're making is really important. And all those pillars that we described help feed into that. And then collaboration. Game can only be made with teams pulling together, helping to fulfill that vision. And then, of course, rapid iteration. Really found success in having the teams work in really, really quick, small, short loop cycles to get results, as opposed to like, you know, waterfall, really slow, and building on an experience. So, you know, us as designers and producers on this game, we're kind of like the caretakers of this like holy grail of like where we're going. And you know, the first thing with this vision, you know, knowing your game inside and out, and knowing what it's not. It's really easy to sort of like lose sight of that, because you kind of understand what you think the game is, and then people are like, yeah, but we could also add this to it. And it really sounds appealing in a vacuum, in a really small corner, but it ends up maybe actually polluting the vision. And then knowing to stick to the plan. You know, again, that's sort of all those temptations of like, oh, look what we just figured out what we want to make, and everyone wants to run towards that. So it's always difficult, because all that seems really cool. If it doesn't fit towards those pillars of that vision of the game, it may be best to leave it alone. And then evangelizing, you know, that sort of idea of, you know, you have to actually go out and get the ideas out to the team. And that kind of takes me sort of this thing that I was trying to visualize it, but basically you're pointing at this star constantly to everyone, right? Like, this is what we're making, and everyone's heading towards it, and it totally makes sense. So you do it once, then you go back to your desk, and after a time, it's like, people are like, what is it we're making? I got an idea, let's go over here. And so it's really important, you go back to the team, and you tell them, no, this is what we're making, and you have to repeatedly evangelize. You know, that's your role. You have to kind of get out there and get people always driving towards that end goal together, which repeats and repeats and repeats, and you have to keep doing that. You can't just sit down and send an email out and say, hey, what are we doing?
Yeah, it only stops when it's in the box. So there's a number of ways of doing this, evangelizing the vision of the game, communicating the vision of the game. One way is to write giant 500,000-page design documents and have it pile up and send emails and do everything in written form. And very quickly what you find is you've got a giant wall of text that nobody really reads, and if they're not going to read it, they're not going to understand it. And that's where you get that spread of people going off all in their different directions. So you arrive at the Dead Sea Scrolls of design. They're ancient and old, and no one maintains them, and nobody really pays attention to them. So what are some better ways of doing this? our mantra has been to basically keep it light, keep it really accessible. Things like wiki-based design, where everything you can just jump into the browser, and you want to understand more about the clothing design or the weapon design or the level design, you just hit a button and boom, it's all right there. PowerPoint, just like we're doing today, you know, gathering the team, gathering groups and getting them in front of a screen and walking them through and saying, hey guys, here's where it is. This is where that star is at. And pictures. Everyone knows that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Sometimes a squiggle on a whiteboard is worth 10 pages of design doc. So as much as possible, keep this stuff visual.
And then, you know, working and collaborating together, really found that having something like a story in Dead Rising, the only way we could really breathe life into it and actually get it heading towards the same goal is having like core gameplay and level design and art like embedded together, sort of massaging each other's areas to make this story support what they want to do and be successful in each of their areas. So it's this idea of, you know, pods. It's not groundbreaking. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this or have employed this process, but again, we found a really big success with this where we repeatedly evangelize where we want to go, let this mixed discipline group of folks in a pod head towards it. And you'll find they actually fill out a lot more details that you never even thought of or had the time to even manage. And you'll find a lot more cross-pollination where like animators are, you know, working with designers and they're feeding back and forth. And everyone gets really, really motivated. They're making an experience together, which is much more important than saying, I'm hammering on nails and I'm fulfilling the design that came to me.
Yeah, so what you arrive at is that there's the design, and there's that sort of wealth of knowledge that's all been documented. And in an ideal world, it would be great if, as a designer, you could finish pre-production and you could throw this design over the wall and go lie on a beach for 12 months while the team makes the game.
That'd be rad.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So the design informs the game turns around and informs the design. It's about iteration, and it's about getting the design as far along as the team needs it to be for them to actually implement something that has some value, and then playing it and deciding what's working with the design and what isn't, and just getting this cycle going of iteration, and it goes all the way through the entire product.
And right down to like world and character. You know, we're developing a character with movement trees and attack trees, and all that is meaningless if the world is like this horrible metrics mess. You know, you have to actually have a really solid world rule set that drives a lot of the rules for animation and drives a lot of the rules for art. But what we found is that developing core around the world at the same time allowed us to actually flex in each other's ways. What we would find that what we'd do is we'd make a space and like, you know what, actually we're finding that the locomotion's now not working out so well here. Is it because the metrics need to be reevaluated, or is it that we actually need to build onto the movement tree to actually overcome these metrics? And working together from the ground up, the next thing we're going to show you is an example of that metrics box actually running. So if I can get the kit up, I'll walk you guys through. So mind me, I have to like stand back or I'm going to barf because it's way too big. All right, so what you have here is this metrics box that was an evolving world space for us, that as we were developing the game and as artists were developing spaces and level designers were building and blocking in spaces, it would always come back to this area, whether or not it followed the rules or whether or not we need to grow the box more and more to decide if it needs to conform. And it goes down to like really simple things like, you know, what are the metrics for climbing? And just knowing that the animations will solve it and what it'll look like coming off. And then understanding what the limits are. And, you know, we found like, you know, writing all of these rules out on a piece of paper, artists, I found, don't read. Sorry to any artists in here, but it was a lot easier actually to put this in front of them and actually like type in, you know, all these words and say, hey, by the way, this is the max step height that can ever be in the game. You know, here's the minimum space that can ever exist, and actually type it out. You know, minimum width. This is the minimum space a player needs to have under their feet at any time to exist. You know, it seems really trivial, but you'll find when art comes in, a lot of the stuff ends up breaking metrics like nuts. Even stuff like camera clearance, the lowest ceiling height, and that actually helped inform our camera design for how we would actually negotiate and dip down like that. And we did that really early, and all the way to like start building out the space here. We got well, kind of like doors. Seems really trivial, but Doors are honestly something, if you don't get right really early, it's really painful to have hundreds of different door metrics and then also have really odd metrics. So it was really important to get those door metrics right and then use this as a template for the artist to copy and paste from or just refer to. Even wall widths, again, it's an easy something to lose sight of, but you'll find, like, you know, sometimes in levels or worlds, the walls are incredibly thick and you don't understand why, because it's just a house. Sometimes they're incredibly thin, but it's supposed to be a bomb shelter. Even a sidewalk, it's really important that sidewalks look like that. Stairs, all that kind of good stuff. You can see it just keeps growing and growing for what we had to keep answering. Ignore those things, please. Please ignore that. Hallways even. It sounds mundane, but a lot of this stuff is establishing world metrics that will make the space feel right. And what we did a lot of was extracted it from Dead Rising. We wanted to make sure we captured that world space and that density and that feel. So we reverse engineered a lot of their spaces and then build that template to help build out all the new spaces that we want the players to experience. And as you mentioned, it's a casino world, so we had to figure out what casino metrics were and what that meant for gameplay, for whether or not it was climbable, which is really important, and heights of chairs and all that kind of stuff. And then going to casinos and measuring and taking photos and trying to figure out what makes a casino chair height right as an awesome way to go to Vegas excuse. Blackjack tables. Lost money on those. Don't use blackjack tables in real life. And then even growing out to sort of, let me just fly in here because I can't really show you stuff. But yeah, and then just going down to like tables and chairs and every little detail is even a bar fridge. Because we found an artist made a bar fridge that was like the size of a car. And the script said it was a bar fridge, so what appeared in the metrics box? A bar fridge. Coffee tables, desks, wardrobes, every little thing we started building on. And what we found is, obviously this doesn't turn into a complete inventory of every single item modeled in the game. It just, these little bits are helping to answer like questions that then fuel a general metric and the team starts getting on board with it. Even counters. Yeah. Let me go. Oh yeah, and as you notice, the 1 meter texture, really important. Got to get people sort of feeling what world space is and getting used to that. And then store templates. And this is not to say that we have stores in Dead Rising 2. I am showing you an example of store templates. Yeah, and just trying to measure all that stuff out. You know, widths of spaces. You know, if you have like characters coming in here and you want them to actually have a fun experience, you know, if you don't actually get people figuring this stuff out, which is a 1 meter padding to artists, by the way, because I remember we saw the minimum width was 1 meter, but I always told them 2, because they always would go down to 1. But we'd end up with space like this that will allow you, another NPC or two, and actually have some fun in here and not feel like you're fighting the world. Yeah, so that's all kind of good stuff.
Cool.
If I can go back to the PowerPoint, that'd be awesome.